there, my name's Gill Tiney. I'm from Collaboration Global, and this is our podcast, Being Human, Hidden Depths. I'm going to be interviewing some of our members from Collaboration Global, and they're going to be sharing with you their extraordinary lives. Although they would probably believe they're just normal, everyday, average humans, but they are extraordinary. A bit like you and me. We all have our story to tell. We've all been through difficult times, and we've come out the other end having learnt an extraordinary amount about ourselves that we can share with others. So I think you'll find lots of things that will resonate with where you've been in your journey as well. I look forward to seeing you on the other side. Hi there, welcome to Being Human, Hidden Depths, the podcast by Collaboration Global. My name is Gill Tiney, and I'm thrilled to say we have our guest, Phil Street, one of our newest members at Collaboration Global. Welcome, Phil. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for asking me to come on so quickly after joining.
I know, we've spoken quite a bit recently, and I thought the whole concept of what you're about and what you're doing, it was like, I need to get that out there really sooner rather than later. Some people have got, they're jogging along and they're doing great things and they're just kind of happy to go, oh yeah, we'll do it in a couple of months, we'll do it in 4 months, we'll do it whenever. And then we had that session about the book that you're writing, more of that later. And I'm like, wow, I like this. So it's like, come on, we need to do it now. And we probably need to do it 2 or 3 times, and we'll probably do a podcast several times. There's so much fodder that we have here. So let's start at the beginning. What attracted you, or how did you find out about Collaboration Global, and what attracted you and what made you go, oh, actually, I'd quite like to be part of that?
Yeah, I think for a long time now, I've had a collaborative mindset, but not really knowing what to do with it, to be honest. And I know one of your current members, Simon Thomas, through networking, specifically with my local roundtable.
Right.
We do a lot of social and charitable work locally.
Yeah.
And he actually said to me, well, you need to come along to this. I think it's right up your street. Absolutely, pardon the pun. And didn't really, I took it in, but I didn't actually think anything of it. And I said, yes, I must get along to a meeting, must get along to a meeting, must get along to a meeting. Lockdown.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then all the meetings went online, of course, at that point. And then, but as kind of luck would have it, I suppose, a boozy conversation with Simon about writing a book.
Surely not with Simon.
No. Connected me with you, because obviously that's one of the many wonderful things that you do. And I just came along to an online meeting, immediately captivated by a number of things, actually. I think mainly that it was such an open forum. No judgment, no, just say what you think, what comes into your brain. Nobody's going to jump down your neck. They're going to take your comments on board and then take it wherever it needs to go. But obviously, and there was also this real outpouring of, oh, have you thought about this? Oh, have you thought about that? And it was just, and I just thought, this is where I need to be. And that was kind of it. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, brilliant. It's lovely. While you're saying that about no judgment, I was just reminded of a time many years ago when I went to a sort of mastermind evening, and it was early days in my business career, and the conversation was around KPIs, and people were talking, and I think I was the only girl in the room at the time, and it was about 15 guys, and it was a great big table. So I just kind of KPI this, KPI that, KPI this, and I'm like, oh, I don't know what KPI is. I don't know what this jargon. I'm gonna have to be brave. So excuse me. Am I the only one that doesn't know what KPI is? Can you explain what it is? Oh, key performance indicator, Stu. Oh, right. Okay, fine. The guy dead opposite me just went, what KPI is? And I'm like, oh, so immediately I'm feeling, oh shit, I've made myself look silly, I really shouldn't, and your insecurity gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah. And I'm just like ignoring this person. I'm going to be grown up, I'm going to ignore him. And I glanced over the other direction, and another guy looked at me and went, I didn't know either.
Yeah, it's such a key thing though, isn't it? When you go into a lot of situations in life whereby you've got the judgers So to find a space where, and the ironic thing about this actually is now, having turned 40 a couple of years ago, I had many a great epiphany, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But one of the things for me was learning to not give a monkeys about what people think.
Yeah.
And or not take it personally. I still care what people think.
Yes.
But if you're going to just jump and talk to talk down to me about my opinion on something, then I've got no interest in entertaining that kind of conversation.
No, it says more about them than it does about you, doesn't it? And
Absolutely.
I don't know if that comes with age or just experience and knowledge that we glean in our personal development journey. But certainly at that point, I was, if somebody looked me up and down the wrong way, I would have been, oh, what's wrong with me? What's wrong? And now I'm like, well, why are you looking at me like that? And what's going on in your head? I've got no idea what's going on in your head, so I'm not going to judge you. And I think the people that are attracted to Collaboration Global, we're human. Every so often you're going to get triggered by something or you're going to judge somebody, but we're grown up enough, and part of the culture is to not take our first reaction, and it's about responding rather than reacting. So even if you do get triggered by something, it's like, what they just said upset me. They obviously didn't intend to upset me, so what is it in me that has created that upset? And you kind of examine and re-examine what's happened. And if you still don't get past it and you think maybe they did it on purpose, or they said something they hadn't realized was affecting you, you need to go and talk to them about it, and you have a grown-up conversation. Did you realize that when you said that, actually I felt quite, oh no, and half the time it's like, oh I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do that, I didn't realize. And so it goes back to another conversation we had, like Black Lives Matter. There are so many times that us white guys will say something in pure innocence without realizing the unconscious bias that has been created over our lifetime. And then when someone points it out to you, you're like, oh wow, did not see that.
It's obvious.
Thank you. Yeah. And you're grateful for having it opened up to you. So, and I think there are other environments out there that are like that, but not consciously nurturing it.
Yeah. So I think that's absolutely fair, because I think the nurturing element is a massive part of collaboration, because you can't enter into any collaboration with every single skill set under your own banner.
Yes.
So people nurture these skill sets out of you, or you have the capability to then bring the people together where they match the skills with the gaps, and away you go, and away you fly.
And when you're working with grown-ups, that have already been in that culture and know what it's about, all of a sudden it's so much easier.
Yeah.
You haven't got to worry about the ego and somebody coming and going, well, you do it, why are you doing it that way? That's wrong. Well, we've established.
And I think, actually, importantly, it's not to kind of, I suppose, about having I completely lost my train of thought. This was always going to happen in a podcast. Giving us back to my podcaster as well, which is really weird. But
it happens to the best of us. It's fine.
Yeah, I'm not saying that people don't come and challenge you. That's really important. Yeah, really important. Definitely. But I think go about it in the right way.
It's with respect.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned earlier that a couple of years ago you hit the big 4-0. And obviously, do you know what? It's really interesting how some people get affected by that number. It is just a number. It doesn't really mean anything to us, but we do get affected by it. For me, mine was 35, weirdly. It was, I'm 70 years and 10 is when you've done your lot, and I'm halfway to that, and I've done nothing with my life. Oh my goodness, I've got to get on and make it happen. So that was a big one for me, and everyone since then, 40, 50, and not that far away, 60, it's not going to touch the sides. And my husband, he's just hit 60, and it did kind of get to him. And he's never been fitter. He's running every day. He's the business is in a great space, but it's affected him. It's that number. So what happened to you when you got to 40? Was it like the big?
Well, I feel like I need to tell you what happened to me when I was 25, actually, because that was a bigger moment. I suppose for the time that I was in, it was a bigger moment. That's when I had the big epiphany about age is just a number.
Great.
And the reason for that was, because I was in a relationship. For all intents and purposes, I thought that was the one, and we were going to be together forever and all of that sort of thing. And then We went traveling around Australia, and within 3 days, she split up with me.
Oh,
And I
okay.
did not see it coming at all.
Oh, 3 days.
And I was age 25, and my first reaction was, which is quite hilarious, was, well, I'm 25, I'm off the shelf, I'm over the hill, I've got nothing to offer. I'm so old, and all of these sorts of things. And
Yeah.
The hilarious thing about that was is that I then, obviously that's completely wrong.
Yeah.
Went traveling on my own rather than just taking the easy option, which would have been just to put my tail between my legs and go home.
Yeah.
Traveled around Australia a little bit on my own, met so many amazing people.
I'll bet. Yeah.
And woke up one day and just said, well, wow, so we can't control this thing called age. It happens to you. And if you're lucky enough to have a great deal many years, then let it happen to you. So actually, when I got to 40, I was kind of, the epiphany for me wasn't about, oh my God, I'm 40. And the strange thing about that was is that I remember my father saying to me on my 40th birthday, what's your big epiphany? Everybody has a big epiphany.
Oh.
And I said, actually, I've not had it yet. I'm ready and waiting. And then 6 months later, I had the big epiphany, which was time.
Right.
Time is precious, and that wasn't a scary thought. That was okay. Time is precious. So what are you waiting for?
Yeah.
Crack on.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. That as I say, that got to me about 35. But have you read any of Eckhart Tolle's work?
I haven't.
The Power of Now. Recommend it to everybody. It is, there is no yesterday, there is no tomorrow. You've got now, and it isn't about abandoning everything else because that's all you've got. It's not a depressing kind of mindset. It's an empowering and inspiring mindset, because what you do in this moment can move on and move on and move on, but you've only ever got this moment, so you have to make it the best part of your life. So your life is now, this moment. So if you're doing something that is just taking up too much of your time, and every moment you're hating it, you've got to work towards getting out of that, so that you can, that is not a very good summary. I'm sorry, Mr. Eckhart Tolle, but it's really good. It's a short book, but the essence is, don't waste it. Don't waste it at all. I think somebody, was it Mae West, said she wants to go kicking and screaming when she dies, and thoroughly used up, and I like that sort of philosophy.
Yeah, well, there's so many cliches around. The cliches are wisdom, really, ultimately, aren't they? And we are a long time dead is a great one. It's so true. And you don't know when you're going to be taken, so get on with it. There is only now. The experience element is a massively important thing for me, and I don't mean that in terms of career experience, or I actually mean life experience. And I think I was lucky enough to have parents who really valued that as part of our education as kids. Me and my brother, we definitely were. I don't think I fully appreciated it back then, but I definitely, looking back on it, I think it plays a massive part in how much I crave experience, new experience. And why I suppose I'm not scared of trying something new. If it's shiny and new, I'll give it a go. And okay, if I'm not good at it, then fair enough, we'll park that and we'll move on. I don't know if it has a bearing on it at all. I was thinking about this actually whilst out walking the dog the other day, and that was one element of it. The other element was that I had a childhood at school that wasn't wonderful. I wasn't bullied relentlessly or anything like that, but I was bullied from time to time. So I think that kind of put me on edge a little bit going into school. Is today going to be a day that I can get by without any trouble?
Gosh, yeah.
And then go home to the sanctuary of home, and and then go out, and we were always out doing stuff as a family. And then I went to secondary school, and much the same thing. My parents wanted to quit the rat race. They were both quite successful in corporate jobs. Yeah. But they identified an opportunity on an island called Tiree on the west coast of Scotland. Okay. To give the bedrooms that were available to tourists a bit of an uplift. So they converted a church from nothing with no experience and turned it into a hotel.
Wow.
Which is where I think my first love of hospitality kind of came in, but we might delve into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But it was an island environment. We did have a secondary school there, and you could do secondary school all the way up to the end. So I was in a class of 8 people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is quite remarkable looking back. But I was always viewed a little bit like an outsider. Not born and bred on the island.
Yeah.
So again, from primary school to secondary school, didn't feel like I had found home, other than the home that my mother and father were creating. So I think that probably played its part as well in my desire to go out and experience. And for as long as I can remember, I've wanted to travel.
Yeah.
And that then led me I went to university, and actually university is probably the first place where, and if you think about this logically, it makes so much sense. The first place that I started to feel like I was part of something, because basically I think you have people coming from all walks of life who are all in exactly the same thing together. They're not coming with the stability of a friendship group, a clique, or whatever.
Fresh
so you
start.
have to go out and
make friends.
And make that fresh start. Yeah. That's the first time that I can remember, I think, coming out of myself a little bit in terms of social confidence.
Right.
At secondary school, I was quite good at sport. It's a very small school. So I was a big fish in a small pond.
Yeah.
Immediately went to university and was a small fish in a big pond.
That's tough, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was also a big realization that a lot's made of that kind of thing. You know, the sports confidence that I got from that took me into university with quite a lot of confidence on the sports side. Immediately that was taken away, but I didn't dip into this, oh my God, I'm useless.
Good.
Oh my God, I have to work harder. That was basically the
interesting.
ethos that went into my head.
Because you easily could have given up and gone, oh, I'm no good at that anymore. What else can I do? And looked around for something else. But
yeah,
you just thought, I'll work harder. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, this is a point that I think we've discussed before, is that I went to university because I wanted to get away from the island. Not necessarily because I wanted to go and learn the subject that I chose, which was leisure and recreation management. I had an interest in sport, so that made sense, but I wasn't 100% convinced that that's what I really wanted to do. And to be honest, it was a management degree, and management for me is common sense, so it actually really played into my strengths, and that's one of my gifts that I think I've got, and I'll maybe talk about gifts later on. But I actually didn't work very hard at university at all.
It sounds like you didn't have to. It was because you felt it was common sense, and presumably your parents had some. I don't know if you worked for them at any point, but if they were in the hospitality trade, obviously a lot of it was like second nature to you as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. The funny thing about that is that I actually, even though my mother and father ran a hotel, is that I got to 16 years old and thought there's no way I'm ever going to work in hospitality.
It's hard work.
Well, I'm a teenager as well. I think we ask a lot of teenagers to make decisions that they're not necessarily ready for.
Yeah.
I definitely wasn't ready to make decisions like that. And I didn't really have a clue what I wanted to do. But the funny thing about that is that I'm 42 years old now, and I'm still not sure I know what I want to do.
I was just going to ask you that, yeah.
And I'm 100% cool with that now. I think there's also a massive pressure in life to figure out the thing that you do and just go and excel at it. But to me, and this maybe comes back to this experience thing again, there's too much to do. There's too many interesting things.
Yeah.
Why do we have to get pigeonholed into doing one? And career has a big part to play in that, because you end up going on a career path, and that's how you then get defined as a human. But actually, that's not the way you should be defined as a human at all.
No, exactly. I mean, it's historic, really, the way we do it, in that you would get a career because that was the thing that you wanted, because it was security, it was safe. Before we had the cushion that we have now, before even the NHS was around, people, you got yourself a job and you kept it for 30, 40, 50 years, whatever, and you were blessed, and that was great. Even if you hated it, it was a job, and the thought of moving. So, for example, in my family, my granddad was a docker, which was great because other dockers, it was hereditary. You could inherit a job. If your dad was a docker, then you could be a docker.
Yeah.
Not the best job in the world, obviously, really hard work, but they paid really well. So it's like, once you were in the docks, it's like, oh, well done. That's great. It's almost like, a doctor to a doctor, or a lawyer to a lawyer. You're in that space, and you don't deviate. And if this doctor's son wants to be a doctor, it's like, don't be ridiculous. You can get in the docks. That's fine. Why would you want to be a doctor?
Yeah.
And it pigeonholes you, but it is that kind of mentality of be safe and keep that job. Now, my goodness, most of the millennials out there, if they've had a job longer than 2 years, they're concerned that they haven't changed their CV recently. And what does that look like if you haven't moved around? So they're getting massive amount of variety because they're trying stuff out all the time. And there is no safe job anymore, is there?
No, well, in the times we live in, for sure.
Well, exactly.
No, indeed.
I mean, when a friend of mine, her daughter is a researcher on TV, and when they first brought in at the BBC, no permanent contracts. So you just go from job to job to job. So you effectively became self-employed in an environment that used to be another safe job. Oh, get a job for the BBC and you're there for life. Doesn't happen anymore. So now she's worked for Channel 4, she's worked for all the other ones, and her mum was like, oh my goodness. And I'm like, well, it's the same as anyone that has their own business. We don't have that stability and that security. We have to keep building and trying new things to bring the money in. So it's the same sort of philosophy. But it's hard for a lot of people to change that mentality of you have to be safe. Be safe.
For sure. Have you read Rich Dad Poor Dad?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's that concept, isn't it? That this is the you go to school, you do as best you can, you go to university, get the best degree you can, which sets you up into a job. But that's the system, and that's the way that the system works. But that doesn't work for everyone.
No.
But yet, you're kind of, when you're at school. I remember having a chat with a careers advisor at school, and I wasn't academic in any way, mainly because I couldn't be bothered. Because I found sport and actually women at the time, but in any case, that's a different story.
Yep.
And
part two.
and I was good at physics. Naturally, it just seemed to come reasonably easy to me. And so the natural thing for a careers advisor to tell me was, you need to go to university to study physics. And I genuinely could not have thought of anything worse.
Yes,
I just was, maybe that's my fault for just not accepting that was one of my gifts, and maybe I should have done more with it, but I just didn't. There was no passion for physics. I was just sorry to everyone else who was bad at physics, but it came a bit easy.
Well, I think it's sometimes just how your brain works, isn't it? And you kind of, as you say, when it's your gift, it seems common sense to you. And other people, so I did physics at school, GCSE, actually O-level, if I'm honest, goes back away. And I got an E, so I failed miserably. And my teacher was really surprised because I was quite a goody two-shoes and did all the work and was quite good at other subjects. And he's like, oh, they've marked it wrong. Let me pay to have your paper marked again. I'm like, no, you're okay. I know I was rubbish. It's fine. Because I just didn't enjoy it. Wasn't enthralled by it. It didn't, or whether it was the teacher. And that's another thing as well, isn't it? You never know if it's the method you're having taught to you, or whether it's you and you're just not cognizant of how it should work. There's
absolutely
so many ways, and that's why I think a lot of our children today are let down, because there is the way to learn, and we know in reality there are a million ways to learn, and they don't get to choose.
Absolutely.
They get told.
Why should your future really be determined by your performance on one day under a not real world situation whereby you're timed to do an exam?
right, crazy.
It's not right. And I can say that as somebody who didn't get on well in an exam environment. But then maybe you could argue that's just because I just didn't try back then, because it just it wasn't something that interested me, so I didn't do it. The amazing thing about, there's lots of little snippets from your life, and probably everybody would be exactly the same. There's things that you can remember that you then kind of take forward with you, or maybe you take it as fact that that's the way that you are. And I remember my home economics teacher telling me one day, you'll never do anything with food. And
helpful.
I ended up running food and beverage for on a cruise ship, so I think it did do something with food. Yeah, I mean, my mother always used to say to me, that's the way it seems to get you motivated. If somebody tells you can't do it, you then say, okay, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. But in any case.
Yeah, well, at least you did it. So moving on slightly then, so you've had your epiphany at 40 and realised that time is really precious. You've got your day job going, which we've heard briefly is around hospitality. Tell us what you're doing for a living, which is just what you do. So, a snippet of that, but also, more importantly, what you're passionate about now. What's driving you?
Yeah, I run a recruitment company within the hospitality space, and that's something that I still care about deeply, because I having not initially been in love with hospitality, I did find that love in my early 20s, and that's something I've taken with me. I fell out of love with the hours that you had to keep to run an operation and things like that, but actually now as a voice who's on kind of I suppose what you would call the periphery of the industry, I actually am beginning to find my voice in the space a lot more now, because just because I'm not running a restaurant doesn't mean that I don't know what hospitality is, because we're all consumers of it ultimately. And actually that's the most important thing and I was talking to somebody about this point this morning in business. A lot of the time people start businesses because it's something they're passionate about, or they want to do, and that's a really great place to start. But you have to evolve and really know what your client wants or your guest wants to ultimately really make a success of it. Hospitality has obviously been slammed hard in this time that we're in at the moment. So there's not a lot of recruitment going on in the world right now, which has been a really, I suppose I'm one of these people, I'm definitely, I actually came up with a saying the other day, the glass half full, half empty. I'm actually a glass 8/10 full. And the reason I'm not full is because it's actually still quite a lovely thing to get your glass topped up unexpectedly.
That's true. I like that. Yeah. Well, you weren't expecting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've actually used this time, and don't get me wrong, I have good days and bad days in the situation that we're in. Ultimately, recruitment pays my mortgage and all of these sorts of things. But actually what it's done is allowed me time to really start exploring my brain a little bit more. And my brain's always intrigued me. I think dependent on the situation that you're in, it's probably a blessing and a curse. I have a very noisy brain, and to be honest, it never shuts up.
Oh dear.
And it's not full of dark noises telling me to go and do dark things or anything like that. Good. Thankfully, it's full of ideas, and so now I'm really just, I almost feel lucky that we've been given this opportunity to reset a little bit and just really figure out what really excites you and what really gets you going. It's one of the reasons I joined your group, because I immediately felt the connection that this is a place where I can just go and drop some ideas and just see what happens.
Yes. Yeah, let them percolate and see who picks them up to run with them. That's what's really lovely as well. I like that idea. We had one guy a couple of years ago, and he was a career coach, and he helped people that were being made redundant to kind of go over their CVs and make sure that they were ready. So that he would be employed by the company to say, right, we're making this 250 people redundant. Can you work with them and make sure that they're ready to go and look for another job, to kind of ease the path out? But he was passionate about education because he believed that young people coming out of sixth form or university didn't have a clue about what their personal skills were, what their personal passions were, and how to illustrate that in their CV. So he put together with two other people. One was a lady that did gamification, and one was a lady that did storytelling. And they put together a game to go into sixth forms and universities to kind of help people understand what their gifts were, and where they should be heading for, rather than just, off you go, fill that form in, see how you get on. It was much more crafted. And he would never have done that he wouldn't have gone into schools, he wouldn't have been approaching people like that if he didn't have a couple of other people that were going, come on, let's do this together. That was brilliant. Let's get something. And they created something amazing.
Yeah.
But it is that kind of thing. You put stuff out there and all of a sudden somebody goes, right, I'll have that. Brilliant.
Yeah.
It's like passing the rugby ball, you catch it and you go, right, where am I going to go with this? And who's with me? Who's on my team?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of where I'm kind of going now is centered around, I suppose, learning that's come from adversity. I think you and I have spoken about the fact that at the age of 39, I got a diagnosis of something called tethered cord syndrome. And in its simplistic form, what that means is that it does exactly what it says on the tin. My spinal cord is tethered to my spine. So it should dangle free. And that affects your lumbar region. So basically, that's toilet function. But it also can play with your legs a little bit and leads to numbness and pain sometimes. And I remember when I got this diagnosis, and then they said to me, in your particular case, normally it's quite a straightforward untethering, but in your situation, it's sort of entwined with sinew and fatty tissue and all of that. So actually, it's a higher risk operation, and the chances of us clipping something that we shouldn't clip, and the worst case is then you end up in a wheelchair.
Yeah, and
that's something that kind of rocked me a little bit. I'm quite a physical guy. I quite enjoy sport and activity. I was into running in a big way at that time. But what happens in that time is that all of a sudden, everybody that's around you knows more than you do on the subject, and knows more about your own body than you do.
Oh gosh!
So the doctors are telling you, okay, so now you can't run anymore. You then have that backed up by your support network, and bless them, I know that comes just from a position of care, and they don't want me to cause myself any trouble. Yeah. But actually, that then manifests in your head about the fact, well, I can't do this and I can't do that, and that takes you took me a little bit of time to get past, and actually begin to turn that around and go, actually, nobody can tell me what I can and can't do. I'm lucky enough to have a really loving and stable relationship, which is really, really helpful. And all of a sudden you start to think, well, why is this holding you back? Currently, I can still walk. Currently, I can still go to the toilet unaided, thankfully. There's some things that you have to kind of adapt to. I do have now something that I like to call toilet lottery, because the messages that come from my brain into that area are mixed. So sometimes I go in for a number one, and a number two says, actually, how about me now? Yeah. But anyway, I don't want to make this about toilet movements, but
it's complicated though, isn't it? When you've got something like that is not, when you've got a sore finger, people can see you've got a sore finger. If you've got a broken leg, they can see you've got a broken leg. But when you've got something like that to all intents and purposes, you look at you and you go, well, what's wrong with him? He's fine.
Yeah.
And then you're dealing with that on a daily basis, and it must mess with your head. It
definitely did. And then one of the things that I then thought about was, well, look, what's funny things that happen actually in your life, and I think you've got to be really open to what's going on to really see things for what they really are. I had my 40th birthday party actually, and I'd had this diagnosis by then, of course, and I'd actually had my university mates who we've kept in touch with for all these years. They were not aware of any of this, so I ended up talking to them about it. And then one of them says to me, "Oh, do you know what happened to my brother?" No, tell me. And he was in a horrific car accident that basically nearly took his legs completely from him. And he spent the best part of about 3 years, having multiple operations, recovering.
Yeah.
Was in a wheelchair for long after that, was told by the doctors he'd never have kids, and all of that sort of thing. And then a couple of years ago, they conceived. So that was miracle number one.
Wow.
But also for me, from a purely selfish perspective, in terms of what I took from that conversation was, well, my situation's okay. Actually, I'm still in control at this point. I can still choose to go and have the operation. And in fact, I spend a little bit of my time now exploring, is the information that I've been given fully accurate?
Yeah.
Is there a better option overseas
somewhere?
Does somebody know something more? Because the thing about the medical system is that when you have that conversation with that doctor, that's the end of that doctor's knowledge.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's the end of all of the knowledge.
Exactly.
So somebody else told me that in this process. And it's all of these little things that I think you've really got to be open to accepting. They change your perspective on things. Certainly changed my perspective on things.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I started focusing on, okay, so what can you do with this? And the answer is anything and everything. Pretty much just don't be away from a toilet for 2 hours.
Yeah.
It's probably a reasonable
sensible
strategy.
Yes.
But I then started thinking ahead. Worst case scenario for me, I end up in a wheelchair.
Right.
That scenario then is a discussion with the charity, because it's a spina bifida related ailment.
Yeah.
I then had a discussion with Shine, who are the charity behind spina bifida. And I started to think, well, I might need these guys one day. So what could I do to help? Or what, and a pay it forward kind of mentality. Let's raise money now. Yes. So that
you paid your dues.
if I need it at some point. And that's when I'm a little bit on board with the doctors in terms of not running, because I can actually feel that when I run.
Right.
I can feel it in my leg, and I can feel that could lead to a problem quickly.
So you're being sensible.
Yeah, but I can still walk. And so I thought, well, why don't you do a hike of some kind?
Right.
And then, but my brain went straight to experience. You don't just want to walk from London to Brighton.
No.
You want to, what's the thing to do? And so in my brain, I went, John O'Groats to Land's End.
Shoot.
That's
a long way.
And it's just, it's so, I kind of have to pinch myself sometimes that things happen the way that they happen. I signed up to do a charity pantomime for Springboard, which are a hospitality charity.
Right.
Thoroughly enjoyed that experience, because that reconnected me with a side of me that had been sleeping for years, which was performance.
Lovely.
Basically.
Yeah.
Through that process, met somebody who was obviously directing the show. They had a network in that space, so all of a sudden we started discussing the prospect of turning a walk from John O'Groats to Land's End into a documentary.
Right. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, my eyes are wide, and I'm thinking, well, that's a wonderful thing in itself, because you're documenting this amazing thing that you do. So you've got that to look back on forever, not just what goes on in your brain. But then I just thought, well, as a means to raise the profile of one of the charity, but two of the actual problem, and on researching this issue, they can never really truly know how many people carry what I have, because my symptoms didn't start showing until I was age 39.
Wow.
So the anticipation is that they think up to 1 in 6 people could have something related, which is a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, there you go. These are the sorts of things that people need to know.
Awareness. Yeah, definitely.
And so that's one thing that I'm pursuing at the moment.
Oh, amazing. So when is it all planned for? When do we?
Well, there was a kind of offset moment with this, because my dear wife said to me, you can't do that. That's too far.
You're crazy.
You don't know.
Yes, it is all downhill though, so it's fine. It's okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Totally. Yeah, we are doing it that way as well. We're not going uphill.
Good.
Yeah.
Get warmer.
So my trade-off is that I kind of get where she's coming from. I don't know if my body can cope with that, doing that day in, day out. So I'm doing next May. I've signed up to do the Yorkshire Three Peaks Challenge for Shine.
That's a start. Yeah. That's a challenge in itself, isn't it? That's massive. I know people that have tried and failed to do that. Yeah. Normal, healthy, marathon running people.
Absolutely. So it makes sense to shoot for the stars, but be sensible about it as well. And so we'll see how that goes. But the idea is that gets documented, and that will be part of the overall thing.
That's fascinating. What sort of training do you have to do for that one? And when do you start? Is it after Christmas, or you started already?
Yeah, I've started already. You need to do a lot of walking. That probably surprised you. But the strength training around core, which is good for me anyway, because that's good. I mean, it's good for everyone, to be honest. But but core training is, that can keep stability in the area that I need it the most. So it just makes sense. So those are really the only two things. Then it comes down to stamina, day in, day out, 30 miles a day, there or thereabouts.
How many days?
It will take about 30, I think it's 32 at that pace.
A month. Wow.
Yeah.
That is huge.
But, the flip side of that is that the UK is a beautiful place.
Yes.
And the opportunity to kind of go off the beaten track and see its beauty in all of its glory. And I caveat that with obviously walking through Scotland, which will inevitably rain on me at some point.
Has to, yeah.
but yeah, so
wow, that's incredible.
That's one project.
And you've already had a chat with Katsumi, who is a health coach. So I would imagine he's going to be quite useful to know, to kind of give you additional advice and support. And who knows, once we kind of announce this to our community, maybe one or two others might be keen to walk alongside.
Yeah, I'd definitely be looking for companions, not necessarily for the whole thing, but for stages. Wow. And I think that's also, you mentioned Katsumi, I think his area of expertise is definitely an area of expertise that you need for something like this, because if you're walking 30 miles, that's effectively 10 to 12 hours constantly walking a day.
Yeah.
And, that's a lot of calorie burn.
Yeah.
Even if you're walking at a sort of reasonable sedentary pace.
Yeah. You still need fuel.
Don't know how much fuel you need to take on to make sure that you're not making your life worse. How much water. All of these things need to be considered, but actually that side of it is quite interesting, I think.
So you're aiming to do this when? Next year?
Yeah, all going well, and we're putting together a pitch document at the moment for some documentary-based production companies. That would be a massive win to get somebody on board. I think the interesting thing is the story behind it is quite an interesting story, so that's what we've been told. In any case, so so watch this space.
Well, hopefully, if anyone's listening to this and they're aware of someone that does that kind of thing, we'll give you Phil's details at the end, and you can get in touch directly. And
brilliant.
It's amazing. I'm very much in awe of your ambition of what you want to do. Alongside that, in sort of a tangent, you and I have started your book. I'm just kind of in for the ride. Around a working title, The Happiness Cake. And I only work with people now that I'm truly inspired by, because it's much more fun to help people to create their books and get them out there when you know it's going to have an impact on many, many, if not millions of people. So give us the background behind where it came from. Where did you get the idea?
So this is the story behind this is actually this is one of the reasons I ended up getting married to the woman that I'm married to. Is when we first met, I'd literally had the idea 2 or 3 days before, and she was one of the first people to get the pitch. And I'd never met her at this point. This was on the first meeting.
Oh wow!
And she always said to me that she'd never had that as a chat up line before. I'm going to write a book. But here we are. That was age 20. That would have been 25. And and here we are, 42, and I've not done anything with it. So this is
yeah.
I suppose, about the principle of life getting in the way and getting on a path that's, you know, focused and necessary, but not necessarily getting the best out of you. And I should caveat all of that with the fact that I don't look back on that period negatively in any way, shape, or form. I'm just grateful that I've had my eyes opened a little bit to the possibility of me, I suppose. So that idea came about really on the back of me traveling around Australia when I had to go in search of my own happiness cake. And I came to a sort of rough conclusion, we'll call it that there's a number of different factors in your life that I think you have to get set and happy in order for you to be able to make progress. And I suppose it comes down to a little bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is that you need base things here and there. But I wanted to break that down even further into smaller, more easier to stomach pieces of cake, as I was calling them, because everybody loves cake. And you build your cake like a Trivial Pursuit piece. You get all of these pieces in play, and then, you know, the world is your absolute oyster. And I think for a lot of people, a lot of their perceived happiness centers around money. But actually, I don't think that's really true. I think that's we talk about this a lot in recruitment, about the golden chalice of what drives candidates, and the answer is that everybody is driven differently. But somebody who says that they're driven by money, they're not really, I think. They're you know, we all need money to live and have a life and go and experience things, but ultimately I think there has to be a bigger purpose than making money to get happiness.
And I think sometimes happiness is something that you can choose. You might not have the stuff that you want, and it is just stuff, and you might not have the relationship that you're after, and you might not have the body that you covet, but you can choose to be happy in the moment. We're back to Eckhart Tolle, you know, the power of now. And there's always blessings that you can find. My life has been ruled around my mum, where so every house we've moved to, we've pushed ourselves to the limit, and I've always gone, well, if we can't afford it after a year, we can move down market or whatever. I said, even if we were made homeless and the council had to put us up somewhere and find accommodation for us, or we had to go into rented, we are still going to have more than my mum and dad did when they were raising me and my sister. So if you imagine the flat that I grew up in to the age of 6 and my sister was 11, it was a 2-bedroom flat. It had an outside toilet, had no bathroom, had no heating, there was one coal fire in the whole place, and no hot water. And as a 6-year-old, my life carried on. I didn't have to do any of the hard work, but my mum had to drag the tin bath up from into the first floor, which was the first floor flat, into the living room, stoke the fire, get the fire going so she could boil the water, and then we could have the bath. Just turn the tap on, there's hot water. How lucky are we? So even if you're feeling sorry for yourself, or even if I've had days when, you know, we've had bad deals go wrong and businesses that didn't work out and all those kind of things in the past, when we had supposedly no money, I'd still be able to turn that tap on and hot water would come out. You know, I'd still be able to go to the toilet and not worry about spiders or frogs in the room with me. Silly little, just the luxury of being in a bath, and bubble bath as well, because we never had that when we were kids. I didn't go abroad until I was 21, and it happened to be on my honeymoon. My peers, don't get me wrong, I'm not 100 years old. My peers were going abroad when I was 7, 8, 9. They did have central heating. They had colour TVs. We didn't have a colour TV until I left home at 18. So it's just a different way of being and seeing your happiness in that it's here and now. Take it now, because it is around you. You just got to look for it. And when you're looking in the negative, it's like, I haven't got this and I want that. You're going to feel awful. And money seems to be the solution. But when you're looking around and you're going, look, the sun's shining, it's middle of September, how glorious is that weather at the moment, you know? And you think to yourself, I've exercised today and my body is functioning the way it should be. And, you know, talking to you, you've got this debilitating problem, and yet you're talking about walking from John O'Groats to Land's End. It's like, oh my goodness, how dare I complain if, you know, my muscles are a bit achy? You know, it's perspective and it's context for everything that we do. And I think a lot of the media in our world always focuses on the negative.
Oh,
And
for
it
sure.
just
Don't even get me started on that.
Where's my little
Yeah.
soapbox? I'll go and stand on it right now.
Absolutely.
And that's why, I don't know about you, but I haven't seen the news for years. You still manage to get hold of it, but yeah.
Yeah, no, you get what you need, I think, to understand what's going on. But beyond that, I've got no interest in switching on the news or Newsnight or Question Time or any of these programs that exist, because I watch the sports headlines because that's really important.
Okay.
So,
okay. I don't know. I get told about that by my husband. He tells me what's going on. Like I care.
But it's a big problem, and not just in mainstream media now with social media. You know, we're living in a disinformation age. None of us know what's true and what's not. So why worry about what isn't, and go and make your own truth. That's what I say.
Beautiful phrase. Go and make your own truth. I love it. I would talk to somebody at a party. We went to somebody's birthday party pre-COVID, and they were really furious. We were getting chatting and everything, and the conversation came around to the royals, and they were furious at Meghan Markle. I'm like, oh, she's such a bitch. I'm like, whoa, hang on, look at you. I said, you're getting all flustered, you're getting angry.
Yeah.
You know, oh, but she said this and she said that. I went, did she though? Did she really?
Yeah,
Do you know that? Were you in the room? No, you weren't. So why are you getting upset over something that might be fake news? You don't really know. Oh, it's not right the way she's treating him. Don't know though, do you? So it's just, majority of people out there do watch what's in the newspaper, on TV, and they take it as fact, and actually it's just so damaging and debilitating, because people live in upset, and that upset is physically affecting them. You know, it's affecting their mental well-being, but also their physical well-being as time goes on. If you're constantly getting upset by things you see and hear on TV, well, turn the TV off. Don't put up with it.
Absolutely. There's a wonderful thing on a Ricky Gervais stand-up comedy. I know Ricky Gervais can be quite a divisive individual to focus on, but he sums up social media perfectly in that it's effectively like a guitar lessons. A guitar teacher would put, in the olden days, he'd put up a board in a supermarket to say, I offer guitar lessons. Social media is like somebody seeing that and calling him up and going, I don't want guitar lessons. And I thought that's such a wonderful way to summarize.
So true.
Then don't call and don't get involved, basically.
Yeah.
And I think that there's so many people who are happy to get involved in things that they just, they just don't need to get involved, and it doesn't help their demeanor. It doesn't help them move forward in anything. There's a wonderful, I can't remember his name, but there's a wonderful Indian philosopher. It's not Deepak Chopra. It's another guy. I've seen him I give some TED Talks on philosophy, basically, and his concept of he just uses why worry is the whole. It's literally about a 3-minute presentation.
Yeah.
There's two things in the world that affect us: the things that we can control and the things that we can't. So if you can control it, do what you can to do that. No need to worry. If you can't control it, then why worry? Because you can't control it. So and I remember seeing that and going, my life, the best things, the most genius things are the most simplest ideas.
It's like I'm not sure where it's from, but it's God give me the grace to take action on the things I can take action on, and forgive the things that I can't. Something like that. To forgive the things I can't take action on. It's very similar sort of philosophy. And actually, my personal philosophy around money, having been brought up in a poor household, which I didn't realise at the time. When you look back, you realise you didn't have meat every day of the week. Is like, well, if we got it, hurrah, spend it, enjoy it, make the most of it. If you haven't got it, why worry? It's like, just get on. You can't. And we've had times, which I'm grateful for now. We had a good 2 year. So as a kid, we were quite poor, and then life gets a bit easier. And then when I was living with my boyfriend, now my husband, and we started our first business, and then we got ripped off. So then we had some tough times, and we paid back money that somebody else had, run up debts for us, which was kind of them. And we had to go 2 years, and we literally were living on, vegetables and not buying a thing. And I don't know if I've said this to you before, but people would say to us, "Oh, come out for dinner. Go on. You've not been out for ages. You come out with us." And we can't afford it. "Oh, well, let's have a takeaway then." Can't afford it. "Well, you got to do it sometimes. Go and treat yourself." We ain't got enough money. Seriously, we know exactly where every penny is going. We have to walk most places. We can't afford the bus. It was really, really tough. But in that 2-year period, I stopped wanting stuff. And that is so liberating.
Yeah.
I didn't have to go shopping and just, window shop. And I didn't go out with my friends and go, "Oh, should we get this? Should we get that?" It was like you didn't need to anymore. So all this extra time was freed up. We didn't have the internet at that point to go shop online, but we just didn't need, we realised that everything we had was enough.
Yeah.
So it was like my beginning journey of living in abundance, because we were fine. We had a roof over our head. We had food in our belly. And everything, and we had each other.
Yep.
Don't need anything else.
The period that we live in now, when we're all in lockdown, highlighted really what we need is food and, well, toilet roll. That was one. And a roof over your head, and if you've got those things, then that's wonderful. There's unfortunately a lot of people who don't have either of those things as well. But again, that's a different story. But yeah, it does highlight. A lot of us probably have a lot of wastage in our lives that we don't need. And that's coming back to Kat Toomey. He's got a wonderful concept on donating one of your meals a day to.
Yes.
Yeah. That was
so he
wonderful.
believes in eating less. Obviously, you don't need the calories. You don't need to burn off so many calories if you eat less. So he started by missing one meal a day. And now I believe he just eats at lunchtime. And apparently in Brazil, that's your main meal of the day anyway. So they're used to just having a big meal at lunchtime. And he wants to be able to set up a charity or connect with a charity that wants to, if somebody's giving up a meal, because that's their commitment for their own good health, because there is loads of science around why it's good for you to not eat quite so much. Donate the meal to somebody who doesn't have anything. And I'm like, what a brilliant, genius idea. It's just the logistics of getting it all together, but I'm sure he'll get that sorted at some point.
Yeah,
it's beautiful. Yeah,
brilliant idea. Yeah.
On that note, I've just spotted we've been talking for about an hour. It's gone quick.
Have we really?
Yeah, it goes fast. So Phil, as a final thought, with your John O'Groats to Land's End and your book, this next 12 months is probably going to be pretty big for you.
Yeah, and I've also started a podcast recently as well. That was another wonderful byproduct of lockdown. I was going to do that anyway, but lockdown just helped me get there quicker. So
what's that? If you want to check that out, what's that called?
That's back in the hospitality space. So it's Hospitality Meets with Bill Street. And we just tell the stories of the wonderful things that happen in hospitality through the people that work in the industry. And that was a massively important thing for me as a lover of hospitality. I think a lot of the times it gets a bad rep for all the wrong reasons. And it's the same as most things. Unless you're on the inside, you don't really know what's going on. So I'm just trying to do my bit to raise the positive voice around what is a rather amazing industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I heard before lockdown that different restaurants that were going out of business because people were in the habit of booking 4 or 5 different restaurants because they weren't sure which one they wanted to go to. And then when their friends turned up, they would choose one and go to that and then not tell the others that they weren't coming.
Yeah, it's a problem.
It's, imagine how much business is lost from just being selfish like that. It's horrendous. And so the independents that we should be championing potentially going to go out of business because people are that stupid that they would do that. I mean, at the very least, you would ring up and say, "I'm sorry, we're not coming now."
It's just courtesy and respect, isn't it? They do go a long way.
We seem to have lost them in our current world, but I think maybe the pandemic is bringing them back because we have witnessed so many amazing brave volunteers and all the people that have held this country together. So I think we are on a new plane, a new level of connecting with each other. And again, going back to Collaboration Global, that's about what we're about. Let's come together, let's help each other, let's support each other, let's learn from each other, and care and be kind. You know, and this just makes life so much easier, so much more enjoyable. So thank you so much for being our guest today, Phil. I've loved.
My pleasure.
I'm so inspired by what you're up to, and my mind is already buzzing about maybe we can get a collaborator on every mile all the way down the country to join you on your walk. That would be pretty cool, wouldn't it? That's a good goal for next year. How can people contact you, whether it be about your lovely book that's coming out that they may get hold of, or whether it's about the podcast, or just to email you and say hi? What's the easiest way to get hold of you?
Yeah, I pretty much every way you can imagine, really. I'm a massive LinkedIn user, so that's a really great place to start. Just search me out as Phil Street. I'll be on there as Director of Momentum Hospitality and Momentum Recruitment Hospitality, sorry. God, Momentum Hospitality Recruitment. That shows you how busy we are in recruitment at the moment.
Oh dear.
And feel free to just send me an invite connection through that, but with some context. That maybe you've heard this podcast and you want to chew the fat or whatever. But yeah, just don't just send the invite without context.
Absolutely. Always makes life so much easier. Presumably you haven't got anything set up yet for your walk that we can.
No, there's nothing yet. There's a lot to do in amongst everything else. But
well, keep us posted. Keep us posted, and we'll have you back on the podcast nearer the time, so we can raise awareness and get some interest as well.
Brilliant.
Like I said, fully inspired.
I'll be setting up a fundraising page for the hike next year at some point, but at the moment that's too far off for them to get that off the ground. So
yes, no worries. Thank you again. It's been lovely having you with us today.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we'll look forward to seeing that book when it comes out in the not too distant future.
Fabulous.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you very much.
If anyone's listening and you're interested in coming along to a Collaboration Global meeting and actually meeting Phil at that meeting, you can go to our website, collaborationglobal.org, or you can go to Eventbrite and search for Collaboration Global and you'll find the link there. It's a Zoom link, it's online. The next one is the 29th of September, but we are always on the last Tuesday of the month. And Phil is 99.9% certain to be there, and you can have a little chat with him there as well.
Yeah,
so,
do it.
Gill Tiney, if you want to get a hold of me, Gill Tiney at collaborationglobal.org. And we look forward to seeing you at the next episode. Thanks very much again, Phil. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.